Illustration rarity, also commonly called illustrations, are special cards that feature a new rarity. This rarity was first introduced to the Pokemon TCG in the previous Scarlet and Violet era. These cards are unique because they showcase distinctive and fresh artwork, making them stand out from other cards in the set. Collectors and players often seek out these illustration cards for their appealing designs and the new rarity they add to the game. Now that we've moved into the next era, which is the Mega Evolution era, the printing of illustrations continues, and these cards are incredibly popular. It's no surprise. Many of them have truly spectacular illustrations, and the printing technique gives the impression that, well, they should prove to be timeless. So collectors are very intensively searching for these cards on the market, especially regarding, at least initially, the first generation, the 151 Pokemon, but popular illustrations are still highly valued and appreciated even outside of that very first generation. Here, it's worth mentioning Groudon, which is, well, one of the most sought after and highly coveted cards in the entire set. If I'm not mistaken, it's Paradox Rift. However, as a collector, I love thinking about such topics from a, let's call it, timeless perspective. What does that mean? This fascinating phenomenon, the idea of the timelessness and enduring quality of certain works of art, was something that was first introduced to me and really gave me a lot to think about, especially at a significant moment in my life, when my wife and I were in the process of carefully choosing a photographer for our wedding. It made us reflect on what it means for art to last beyond a single moment. Well, it's an industry where you could say the competition between both on price and product among various freelancers is relatively high. And since these are also quite lucrative assignments for these freelancers, well, at various, trade fairs or on the internet, well, various creators try very hard to stand out to better reach the client. Of course, in the digital world, with the help of ads, SEO, but also primarily in the physical world and through their offer with a certain kind of uniqueness and that artistic resonance. And since it was quite a while ago, 11 years, I remember well that we had a pre-selected artist who boasted quite a bit that, well, he had very innovative techniques for subtle corrections, as if which could take like those ordinary photos and turn them into perfect ones. Exceptional photos, as if stunning in their beauty precisely because of these subtle touch-ups, which, though minor, have a remarkable effect on the overall impression of the image. These gentle enhancements help highlight the natural features and bring out the unique character of each subject, making the final result even more captivating and memorable. And I'll admit, when I saw the results of these various minor corrections enhancing the photos, my initial reaction was like, oh wow, we have technology that allows us to do this kind of thing. It'll look great in an album, or it'll be something to look back on years later. But we also came across an artist who marketed herself very strongly as someone who is deeply dedicated to using primarily all-natural techniques, giving each photo a truly unique soul through her expertise in equipment, light exposure, and all those other important things that really matter in photography. Honestly, I don't know much about that myself. However, she pointed out one fact that really stuck with me, which is that tastes change. Technology changes too. What's the flavor of the month right now? The one that everyone is talking about and that seems truly unique, absolutely fantastic, and just perfect for years to come. It's interesting to note that what is considered the best or most exciting flavor can change very quickly, almost in the blink of an eye. Sometimes a flavor that is popular today might be replaced by something even more surprising tomorrow. I remember in the early days of the internet, various photo overlays were very popular, like frames with hearts or other fancy things. It gave people who previously had no access to such digital tools an ideal way to enhance their photos. Later, of course, it became much more subtle, but elements of modern technology were still used, and when people liked it, it seemed like these things were here to stay. And we're not just talking about photos, but also special effects in movies, right? Which at one time might have seemed mega spectacular and timeless, but then it turned out that as technology advanced in terms of, for example, special effects many of them aged very poorly. And it's in those moments that you could see the genius of films where directors and producers relied primarily on practical special effects, rather than those achieved through computer technology, which always seems like the absolute peak of human capability at the time. Current technology also seems like the peak of human capability to us, and who knows how we'll view today's special effects or today's forms of retouching and corrections in many, many, many years. And why am I talking about all this? Why am I talking about photos? Why am I talking about movies and so on? Because in the collecting world, especially cards, it's worth trying to hunt for timelessness. What do I mean by that? It's well known that the audience's tastes change very intensely. A great example when it comes to Pokemon are, for instance, rainbow cards. Cards, which at one time gained huge popularity because they were something completely unique, they looked really polished, interesting, and certainly very distinctive. And it was those that were, for a time, often the most desirable cards in their sets. And what probably seemed to collectors back then as something truly exceptional, sought after, and probably great also, in terms of long-term investment, now they're just second-tier cards. Rainbow rares are rarely mentioned, and there's not much talk about them making a comeback. Another controversial element in Pokemon cards are the gold cards. They're having a bit of a renaissance right now, but they're also, you could say, speculative and debatable cards whose aging and timelessness over 10, 15, or 20 years is a big question mark. However, what truly draws me to the illustrations is a certain unique element of natural charm and authenticity that these cards possess. The remarkable level of detail and the careful focus on the element of objectively artistic expression make them stand out. Beauty. I mean, these cards really don't have any advanced texture techniques applied to them at all. There are simply no fancy fonts, no special effects, and not a single graphic gimmick here. Everything about them is kept very simple and straightforward. It's just a very carefully refined and detailed illustration, one that truly and genuinely tries to convey, in a meaningful way, the unique art and creative vision of the person who originally created these beautiful cards. And of course, the best example of this is the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved, a card that might actually turn out to be perhaps the most desirable card of the entire Scarlet and Violet era. Even though it's in a tier of cards that aren't the hardest to pull, because unlike special illustration rares, which, depending on the set, usually have pull rates of 1 in 40 to 1 in 70 packs, for illustrations, the pull rate is usually somewhere between 1 in 9 and 1 in 15. So they're much more common cards, yet Magikarp, which I unfortunately can't show you physically today because I don't own it, could actually go down as historically the most desirable card of the entire era, which would certainly be very, very surprising. And the fact that illustrations are being continued in this block of mega evolutions, I think, shows the creators, the Pokemon Company, that there's potential for creating unique cards that age very well. Because many Pokemon cards don't age very well. Many of those, especially the fancy, artistic, computer-generated ones, well, they evoke a certain sentiment, but even these, cards from the XY era, then Sun and Moon, you often see cards there that don't really catch the eye anymore as cards on vendor tables. They mostly just hold a kind of sentimental value for people whose peak interest in the hobby was during that time. The illustrations are, of course, successors to the trainer gallery cards, which, however, differed significantly with their yellow border. The yellow border is in itself a pretty strong element of that Pokemon timelessness, and something that's been with the franchise for many, many years. And I remember well the moment when the switch to those silver borders in the Scarlet and Violet era was seen as a somewhat debatable and rather risky element of changing, like the overall identity of the entire franchise. However, One of the main arguments for that transition was precisely the fact that this silver border allows for a very good way to capture the uniqueness of this particular illustration. And while you could say that, from this example we can see that, yes, there's a very specific reason behind it. Silver borders allow these cards, these illustrations, to stand out with their unique artistic value. What does that actually mean for us? For me personally, you can look at it this way, that we're still witnessing something radically new. Illustrations are a shift in where Pokemon hide their value. That collectible value we look for in cards, no longer just those gold cards, no longer just the rarest ones, like Special Illustration Rare, but precisely these simplified cards that shine with artistic value. First of all, they've caught on. Second, they're very aesthetically unique and have that element of timelessness, right? Which I discussed earlier in the case of, say, movies or photos. So if we believe that these illustrations will simply hold their place for much longer, because I haven't really encountered much negative feedback lately about these cards being unnecessary or that they could be replaced by something else. Indeed, the illustrations from Scarlet and Violet may be mega evolution. To some extent, they could be the first cards of this type in a very long series. And, well, knowing collectors, we know that anything vintage, anything that starts a certain kind of series, well, that's a huge draw for collectors. And just like in comics, we can talk about the first issue where a certain superhero makes an appearance. I don't know much about comics myself, but, well, let's say Dr. Octopus. Let's hope a character like that actually exists. Then maybe a card like this will be remembered 30 years from now as the first illustration that Eevee ever appeared on. And that sounds very attractive from a collector's standpoint, doesn't it? Think about it. Have a good day.